I'd like to now call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Trustee Acosta?
Yes.
Trustee Chang?
Here.
Trustee Gonzalez?
Present.
Trustee Mejia? Trustee Palermo?
Here.
Vice President Parkinson?
Yes.
Trustee Dr. Pizzatelli?
Here.
Trustee Portillo?
Yes.
President Rodas.
Here.
The New Jersey Open Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend meetings of any public body at which any business affecting their interests is discussed and acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the school business administrator board secretary has caused notice of this meeting to be sent to the following, announcing time and place thereof, agenda, etc. The Jersey Journal, the administration bulletin board, and the district website. At this time, I'd like to have a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Silvio Acosta, seconded by Trustee Gonzalez. Roll call.
Trustee Acosta?
Yes.
Trustee Chang?
Yes.
Trustee Gonzalez?
Yes.
Trustee Palermo?
Yes.
Vice President Parkinson?
Yes.
Trustee Dr. Pizzatelli?
Yes.
Trustee Portillo?
Yes.
President Rodas.
Yes.
Okay, at this time I'll be delivering a short PowerPoint presentation, so I'd ask the board to take a seat in the audience. Good evening. I'll begin the presentation on the budget. First, I wanted to go over quickly the timelines for the budget. On February 25th, the governor gave the address on the status of the state of the budget and state aid. Where the figures are released for how much state aid is going to school districts in his budget, and then within 48 hours by law, the governor may have to disclose the amounts that are funded to different school districts. So we received our notice on February 27th, and our funding was flat funding. We did receive an increase from the department. I think in Hudson County, the only district that did receive an increase was Hoboken. And it was because I think of charter school students is the only reason why they received an increase. There were very few increases across the entire state. On March 12th, the board adopted a preliminary budget to be submitted to the county office for their review and approval. And also, since we have two schools in need of improvement, focus schools in focus status, our RAC team also has to review the budget at those two schools, which happens to be the high school and the middle school in that status, and their budget has to be reviewed by the RAC team. So on March 20th, the budget was submitted to the county superintendent, and on April 21st, we received approval from the county superintendent for the budget, and on the 24th, the RAC team approved it, and then on Saturday, it was publicized in the Jersey Journal, which is on board docs. If you'd like to look, it's in there, but it's also in the Saturday edition of the Jersey Journal. So, and then tonight we're here at the public hearing on the budget. And the last day by statute to adopt the budget is May 14th. And by May 19th, have to certify the tax levy to the County Board of Taxation, so that way the tax bills will know how much money to raise for taxes. A quick timeline. Just quick, since we have so many new board members this year, I just wanted to go over some of the rules about the budget and just in general. The budget, we're required to give the county a balanced budget. And the revenues minus the appropriations equals a balanced budget. So what that means is that the revenue that we receive from the state, most of our revenue is from the Department of Education, and is fixed. As I said, we receive no increase. So the only real variable there is the money that we receive for tax levy from the owners of properties within the town of West New York. That's pretty much the only variable. And by statute, we're even locked down to how much we can raise, how much that amount can increase annually. So that's pretty much the only variable on the revenue side. And then, so if the revenue is fixed, then your appropriations have to be fixed, because appropriations are what you're going to spend, your expenditures. So you can't, if you only have $100 to spend, if you only have $100 in revenue, then you can only spend $100. So you have to have a balanced budget. So 100, if your revenue is 100 and your expenditures are 100, then you're zero, you're balanced. So we cannot present an overexpended budget to the county. So our budget was balanced and was approved by the county. The proposed budget is $134,938,557 for next school year. And of that, $15,157,810 is the proposed tax levy, which is the 2% that we're allowed by law, by statute, to increase. We can increase it a little bit more, and I'll go through that in a little bit, how much more we could have increased it. But administratively, we felt due to the economy that just to raise it the 2% was enough. The 2% amounted to, I think it was like $267,000, if my memory's right, $267,000 was the increase. The state annually comes up with an amount that they feel that the districts, all the districts in the state of New Jersey, should contribute to their budget. And for this town, it's based on, their estimate is based on the wealth of the community, the education levels of the community. They feel that our local fair share is $32 million. So you can see that the amount that we're currently contributing is less than half of what the state feels that we should contribute. Even what's ironic is you can only really raise it around the 2% amount annually. So probably it would take over 100 years or longer to even make up the differential, even if you wanted to. So, although, but that's what they feel that we should be raising for our budget, but we're only raising approximately half. And I wanted to share some information. About a month ago, I went to a meeting that the Ed Law Center sponsored. And the Ed Law Center, I'll back up a little bit, back in the mid-'80s, around 1985, there was a lawsuit that was brought in the state of New Jersey against the Department of Education. And it was Abbott versus Burke. And in that lawsuit, a student, Abbott, from the Camden School District, sued Burke, who was the commissioner of the Department of Education at the time, because the premise was that poorer communities that didn't contribute a lot of tax, didn't have the tax ratables or the tax base to contribute to the schools in their town, were not getting an equal education as other more wealthy districts, as like the Milburns and Cherry Hills of New Jersey were receiving. In those communities, the houses are worth more, so that the town is able to tax more and raise more money to contribute to the schools, so that the schools are more better equipped and have better staff and more staff. So the premise of the lawsuit was that more communities could not raise that amount, and the students were not receiving an equal education. And the state constitution requires that all students in the state of New Jersey receive a thorough and efficient education. So those were the underlying foundations of the lawsuit that Abbott brought. And this Department of Ed had to try to close that gap by giving additional funding to, at the time it was, I think 29 districts, and now there's 31 Abbott districts in the state of New Jersey, and these are the 31 districts. Up here on the screen that you can see. And so the state had to help close that gap by giving additional funding to those 31 districts to kind of raise the parity level, if you will. So that way the students in the poorer districts receive the same quality education that a student in a richer district receives. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what the Abbott issue was all about. There was many, I think it's like up to Abbott 14 now, many times the Ed Law Center, who represented the school districts and the poor children in the state of New Jersey, brought the Department of Ed in front of the Supreme Court and fought these battles. So there were many battles that were fought along the way. But there's just a couple things that I wanted to point out that were raised at the, because of the flat funding that we received, there's an issue now whether or not we're receiving the right amount of aid. And the Ed Law Center is like looking into this again to maybe file another suit against the Department of Ed. But some of the information that they disclosed when I was at the meeting a month ago, I wanted to share with you, and this was one of the slides that's courtesy of the Ed Law Center. And what this slide shows is the amount in the required funding. So this goes back to the amount that I said that the state feels that we should contribute, which is, and we're contributing about half, what that deficit is. And you can see we rank number 4 on there. So I guess it's probably better if you were at the bottom of the list, meaning that your town is really contributing what the Department of Ed felt you should contribute versus what you really are contributing. And I don't want to be one-sided about this, and I'll have a slide coming up sooner, that this is not a total town issue or whatever. It's, I guess, the reality of the community that we live in, and all of these communities that are part of the Abbott districts. So it's not fully the town's fault. That's what I want to say. Not that I'm blaming anyone, but it's just the way it is. But you can see that we rank number 4 on the list. So I thought this was interesting just to see where we are in perspective to other districts similar to us. For the tax levy, we're recommending a 2% increase this year, and we also last year increased it by 2%. And the previous year was 1.39%, and 2 years before that it was 0, and then in 10-11 it was 5.37%. So just to give you a 6-year tax, so you can see how much we raised the taxes in the last 6 years. One of the things that I wanted to, the other thing that the Ed Law Center showed is because of, and what I went back to before, what I was saying is that it's not all the community's fault, it's also the Department of Ed's fault, or the state of New Jersey, because they also fund us too, that our funding is inadequate per pupil by $6,823 per pupil is the deficit of our funding. So you can see in this one, we're below adequacy. And the adequacy, what adequacy is the Department of Ed is, they came up in New Jersey, there's the core curriculum content standards, which I guess all the board members hear about all the time that we have to meet. And what the state did is they kind of came up with the perfect school. So if the perfect school has 500 students, it should have 2 janitors, 15 teachers, 2 secretaries. Like, they came up with this perfect school. And they said, okay, to operate that school, it cost X. They computed it out. And then that's how they come up with what the adequacy is, like what you really need to run a building. So you could see that we're the worst of the Abbotts, which is, I guess, not another good place to be. We're below adequacy where we should be in funding from the Department of Ed also to meet our needs. So just to kind of give you an idea of where we sit in the scope of things. But you can see we ranked number 1 on this. So I thought this was an interesting comparison that Law Center also shared. So back to the budget. Where do we get our funding from? Historically, the budget, we get it from 8 major sources. We get it from fund balance, which is the money that we have left over from the previous year. So in business lingo, I guess it would be your profit, the money you didn't spend or whatever from the previous year. Our local tax levy, which I talked about, our non-tax revenue, which is other, like interest income would be one if we rented our facilities, which we don't, but things like that would be non-tax revenue. State and federal funds in the operating budget, and then federal grants and restricted entitlements that we receive. So that there are sources of revenue. Additional sources, which we don't have any, are uses of reserves. So if we had kind of savings accounts, the Department of Ed allows you to have reserves or savings accounts, if you will, and you can put money away for capital reserve, maintenance reserve, tuition reserve. There's, in the law, there's certain reasons why you can isolate money. But because of, I guess, the inadequacy that we have, we barely can float our budget. We don't have that much excess money to throw into these savings accounts, if you will, to fund our budget. So you can see in this year where the revenue came from for this year's budget, the year that we're in this year. And again, the lion's share, 69.6% of it, came from the Department of Education or state provided funds, and then 11% came from the community. For our projected budget for next year, the fund balance that we're going to utilize, we're allowed by state statute to only maintain 2% of our previous year's expenditures. That's all that we're allowed. Anything that's in excess of that 2% must be allocated in the next year's budget. So we had to allocate, I think it was around 1.9 of that, and then we had some additional fund balance that we kicked in to balance the budget, if you will, to bring it up to the 2.8. And then the local tax levy and then miscellaneous revenue, example, interest on investments for total sources of $15,257,810. Then our state aid, these are on the, I'll go through all the different categories. But you can see that the adequacy that I talked about, the $646,000, some of the money that the state gives. Interestingly enough, the Department of Ed has not fully, a couple years ago, there was another Abbott case that was brought against the Department of Ed. And I think it was in the 9-10 school year, that was the last time that they fully funded. This department had to reshuffle the formula, if you will, of how they distributed the state aid. And that was the last time, when they did that, that was the last time they fully funded the formula. And they haven't fully funded it since. So our aid has been flat, even though our costs have been increasing annually. So all these numbers are the same. If you were to look back at last year, these are the same numbers that were in this year's budget. With federal funds, since our federal fund allocations for next year have not been announced yet, we have to budget 85% of what this year's totals are, because we don't know what the allocations will be. We haven't received any word that there'll be a reduction in these. Generally, if there is, we kind of get rumblings. We haven't heard any rumblings that there would be. A couple years ago, there was sequestration, I'm saying that right, where the Congress limited the amount of money, but that hasn't happened this year. So hopefully we'll receive the same amount or a little bit more than we did last year, but we don't know that yet since the amounts have not been released. This is just a pie chart showing where the money comes from to support our budget, and as you can see, the lion's share of it, 82.6% of the proposed budget, is coming from the state, and 11.4% from local, and 3.9% from federal. This slide just gives you a 5-year comparison. This is really 6, right? 6-year comparison of our budget over time. So the first, or really the second column, just shows the grand total of the budget, and then the percent change. And you can see that this year's budget's like $134,699, and it's going down to $134,187. And that's basically because of the federal revenues. We still don't know what they are, so that's probably most of the loss there, if you will. Because it'll probably go back up once we know there's true numbers. And then you can see the tax levy over time, the 4th column in, and then the percent change, and then the amount of state aid that we received. Although I said that we received no increase, there was a slight increase because of the way that ECP was handled and with the carryover of ECP, that's the early childhood program. So that's where that 0.02 or 0.2% came from. This had to do with the ECP carryover. And then the amount of fund balance that we're utilizing to supplement or to balance the budget, if you will, for the coming year. This year's budget, we used $2,000,000 and we're proposing to use 2.83 million for next year's budget. This is a breakdown of how the money is going to be spent by department, if you will. The lion's share of it, almost 50% of it, goes to school-based budgets, which are the direct costs to run the schools. Then special revenue is the grants that we receive from federal government, federal and state government. Equity would be part of that. The early childhood program would be in there. And then maintenance and security is 7%. Employee benefits is 7.3%. The student services is 4.76. Transportation is 1.43. And district funded programs is 3.61. And this tuition is 4.53. I'll just give you a minute to go through most of these yourself. I'm not going to sit here and read all of this to you. The rest are minuscule compared to the previous page, previous slide. This is just a representation by pie chart of what all those were, so that way you can see how they were broken out. And as you can see, the lion's share goes directly into school-based budgets. Okay, that concludes the PowerPoint presentation. And I guess at this time, the board members, thank you. I'd just like to thank Jack and George for their hard work on the budget before I sit down. At this time, I'll ask if there's any board members that have any questions about anything that I quickly went over.
I have a question with regard to just as a general question, and the question is this: if we feel, and obviously with input from the staff and the administration, is there money budgeted for additional positions? Because I feel that in some cases we have a shortage of people that we need now because of state testing, because of scheduling, and you can only spread thin so far, telling administrators that you cover this now, like things like the park or things like scheduling. I mean, there are districts that have, for example, directors of guidance, and I think maybe that's not the exact title that you want, but I think we are lacking in that area with all that is going on now in the state as far as testing is concerned, as far as scheduling of students is concerned. And I think we're shortchanging our administrative staff. So my question is, because they're giving time when they need to be doing other things probably as well. So is there monies that could be allotted for additional positions that I think, particularly at the secondary, might be needed after we speak with maybe the administration or the union or whatever? That's just my view. So do you have money in there?
Although we would love to add new positions to the budget. This budget was very difficult to put together because of the flat funding that we were subject to. And you have to consider that in the budget. We also have increase in healthcare costs. I know prescription rates just came in the other day, and that prescription alone is a 13% increase alone. So it's difficult to even maintain status quo.
To add one position or
alone
two? Is that what you're
add-
telling me? You can't add one or two? We can't change that budget or manipulate it in some sense of the way of putting it in different areas? Because maybe it can't be done right this minute, but I would not be in favor of voting for a budget if there isn't at least some leeway to assist the administration in this district. I truly believe, from my views and what I see, that they could use all the help they could get, because the state has put a great deal of pressure on all districts.
At this point, the budget did receive the county office approval and the RAC team approval. My recommendation is always that the board approve the budget. And really, at this point, the only variable in the budget is the tax rate, because everything else is you're not going to turn down state aid, and you can't appeal for more because they're not going to give it to you. So really, the only variable is the tax levy. And at this point, in my professional opinion, I believe that the board, the quicker that you take ownership of the budget, and since the county approved it, the better off position you're in, because you can always do budget transfers later in the budget once you have ownership of the budget. If you make changes to the budget, it needs to go back to the county and to the county RAC team, or the state RAC team, for their review, and you open yourself back up for their comments. And they might approve something, they might not, but once you own the budget, you can make budget transfers without going through the RAC and county team. So
But why then can't we put it in personnel salaries prior? I mean,
We
if
can-
we're saying,
we
well,
can
I'm
change the
saying,
budget,
and
and
I'd
we
like
can-
to share
we
with my
can add those
colleagues that
positions.
I'm telling you,
And
Well,
then the
right
county
now,
and the state would have to review it.
Christine, if you want to put someone into the budget, you're going to have to get rid of somebody. That's what it comes down to right now. If you want to create a new position, we'd have to get rid of other positions to do it, because we just don't have the funding. That's the problem. We are looking at possibly getting rid of people to meet the budget.
Mr. Rhodes,
I'm not sure about that, John. Your position will be changed. There's got to be monies that are coming for the new person who gets in. I don't mean to use you as the example, but it just happens to be there. But, we need to make sure that our staff has true backing.
I agree with you.
And I have a concern that, with all that is going on in the state, that as good as our people are, and they're very good in that respect, we need to get more people there to help.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more.
Mr. Rhodes, I was actually going to ask the inverse of that question. So I know that we have three contracts coming up. We have the teacher's contract, we have the administrators, and we have the supervisor's contract. Given that I'm assuming all three unions are looking for raises and the state has flat funded us, do we anticipate any layoffs as a result of this funding?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear this.
Oh, I'm asking, given that the state has flat funded us again, despite the fact that we're increasing the local tax levy by about $250,000, I mean, do we anticipate any layoffs as a result of the flat funding?
Most likely there will have to, it depends on the number of retirements that we receive. That we're receiving retirements every day. Well, I don't want to say every day, frequently. And as retirements come in, it does help the budget. And until, we're trying to...
We don't know all the retirements yet.
Yeah, until we have all the retirements. We're hoping that if we do, it would be very little effect on one of the things that
Do you have in here in this budget projected a certain amount of layoffs?
yes. Yes, we do.
Can you tell us what those layoffs look like?
The one thing, I'll mention the one thing that saved us since we had flat funding, obviously, and the only revenue increase was amount from the town, or the amount from the tax levy, the increase in the tax levy, which, and
Kevin, can you speak louder, because I
Sure.
can't hear you.
the only increase was from the tax levy, which is minuscule in the comparison to the entire budget, that the only thing that saved us was the Chapter 78 health contributions. Each year, if you recall, about 4 years ago, the state implemented, well, probably about 5 years ago, they implemented that everybody had to pay 1.5% of their salary towards health benefits, and then the rules changed about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and they phased it in over time, and most of our staff is in the third year, and next year's their 4th year, the final phase-in of that. And we're kind of, I don't want to say it's revenue source, but we are getting an offset to our health benefits costs, and that kind of helps saves us.
As far as layoffs?
Okay, as far as layoffs, let's see, right now we're scheduled for 15 non-tenured teachers, reduction in force, but we received since the budget was struck, because we can't, once we submit the budget to the county, we can't come back and say, oh, here's a new one because someone else just retired. Since the budget was submitted to the county, there were 9 additional retirements that came in.
So 15 non-tenured teachers.
Yes.
Anything else?
And the rest were retirements of people that were not going to be replaced.
Okay, retirements. About how many retirements do you have budgeted?
There was a supervisor, let's see, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 10 retirements that are not being replaced.
Any positions already, supervisors or directors or anything on there that you should be aware of?
There's a supervisor that's not being replaced and 1 reduction in force.
So 2.
But as we get new retirements in, then we can make the changes. We can still change that.
Could you repeat what you said about the supervisors?
There's a reduction in force and a retirement not replaced.
Okay, thank you.
But as we get retirements in, then we can relook at, rework the numbers.
Right.
So 15 non-tenured teachers, 10 retirements that have people that have already retired, or you're assuming?
No, they retired.
Okay.
At the time that we struck the budget, they already retired.
And then
So
two
we took their
supervisors.
position out of the budget. Yes.
You know, Stephen, also you got to keep in mind that when someone does retire, there's what they call breakage. You have to pay that person for his accumulated sick days, which is $15,000. Be up to $15,000.
It could be more than that.
Maybe more than that.
Yeah.
So that,
Days they
see
have.
that you don't see that effect till the following year because you got to pay him the breakage.
Okay. Now, I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, that are we getting less state funding?
Flat.
The state funding was flat.
Is there a reason why we're not getting more state funding?
The
Why?
Department of Ed just didn't allocate additional funding. Hardly any school districts.
I mean, is that something that we're working on for next year?
There's nothing to, I mean, the state just says, here's your allocation. It's
Mr.
not
Richmond.
negotiable.
Mr. Ortsman, you know, I think, as in Kevin's presentation, we're receiving $93 million from state aid and $15 million from our local tax levy. I think the very big concern that we always have every year, in fact, I remember we discussed this last year, is, you know, what if the state comes back? And the state is also facing a massive budget problems itself. It's not funding the pension. You know, 38% of the state's budget, is, in fact, is spent on education. And although I believe you said, Kevin, that there's another Abbott case potentially going through, or it's in litigation right now, we don't necessarily know if we're going to get any additional funding at all. In fact, funding may be withdrawn from the district. And you know, because most of our budget is coming from the state, I mean, we're at the mercy of the state every year. You know, they're at the last meeting, we approved a resolution disagreeing with the governor with regards to the Pension Reform Act that may go on the November ballot. You know, if that gets approved, the pension system will be split in two, and we will be responsible for even more monies, which, in my opinion, is in fact a reduction in state aid even further. So to go to your point, Dr. Piscatelli, you know, I think that, you know, we all hope that we would receive more state funding. We hope that we could raise more from the local tax levy. But in fact, our state aid is flat. I mean, we're looking at layoffs unless there's more retirements coming in. And we're always at the mercy of the state because we're not paying for the majority of our school district.
I understand what you're saying, Matthew, but people work every day, and they have to be, after the children, which they are directly involved with, our main priority. And as things get more and more put on our staff, our administrators, there's only so far we could go without a breaking point. And, you know, I just want to make sure that when this budget is looked at, it's not going to be said, well, we did that already, but we didn't put money in for something that I truly believe as an educator is needed as long as we continue to have the testing that the state is putting on us and the demands for our students. And I think, you know, my colleagues here need to know that. And it's not like I haven't checked in other districts to make sure, but I am a little stunned that we are not getting what I consider enough help for our staff. That's all.
Now, by when is this due to the county?
The budget, the last day to adopt the budget is May 14th.
Ms. Rudisman. I mean, if the board feels that we're being underfunded by the state, I mean, perhaps we can just pass a resolution tonight asking the state to allocate additional funds to us. I think that's as far as, I mean, as Mr. Franchetta said, I mean, the state is coming up with the numbers. I mean, we can ask for more money, for example, passing a resolution. But the money that we get is the money we have to work with. Unless we want to raise taxes, and you know, many of us now are elected officials. Potentially, we could raise taxes according to the PowerPoint presentation. We can, in fact, double the local tax levy. However, as was about 5 or 6 years ago when the taxes went up, there were people marching on Bergen Line Avenue about the taxes. You know, the town itself, I don't think financially is doing very well. The debt of the town has increased over $10 million in the last 4 years. I think if we were to raise taxes more than this 2%, I think we'd face serious questions from the public. But I would pass a resolution asking the state to fund us further per the Abbott decisions.
Yes. What's the legal procedure for that? Is it just making a motion for that and asking it? Attorney?
Yeah, I was going to say you can propose a resolution to set that in place. Yeah, it would be a simple vote on a resolution as you would on any other resolution where you express a position or an opinion.
I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I feel about. I think I'd like to speak further about the 15 non-tenured teachers that we're looking to release, also supervisors, because I mean right now, you know, like Christine said, we're lacking. We might be, you know, we could use more staff, especially with those testing that's going on. But here, we're letting go of staff, and I'm not for that. I mean, perhaps we could sit down and go over these further and look into this further, because I don't know how I feel about that. Letting go of teachers. I mean, I would, what I feel a little bit more comfortable with is, you said if this is due to the county by, what day, please?
May 14th.
We have, the next board meeting will be May 13th?
Yes.
I would feel a little more comfortable if extending this, tabling this to the next board meeting so that we can each take a look at the budget further and do more due diligence and then come back before that date.
May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have asked in a couple of meetings before about doing like a restructuring or an analysis of how we organize. And really, I don't think the reduction should be done in the teacher side. Because comparing to other districts in the administrative part, I think we have repeated positions, and that's what we should cut, not in the teachers.
Well, let me make a comment here, and I'll have Ms. Herrera come to the mic. A lot of these non-tenured teachers that are being dismissed is for performance-based. They had evaluations. It is performance-based, so keep that in mind also. They're just not being
So that
cut.
means they're gonna be replaced.
Well, we're not going to replace them if the budget doesn't allow it.
Mr. Fountain, can I ask a quick question before?
Sure.
Most or all?
Farah, is it mostly all that are being terminated because of performance?
No, can I
Yes.
explain, please?
Yeah, please.
Okay. At the time that the budget was first discussed, as Mr. Franchetta stated, it looked like we had to fire 15 teachers, but, you know, listening to that, I have to say that out of those 15 teachers, 9 are one-year contracts for long-term maternities. The teachers are returning back. They were given a contract with knowing that they will be there a short period of time, that their contract would end June 30th for a maternity. That's a new mandate from the State Department, where if we have a teacher out more than 20 days, we have to contract with a new teacher who is highly qualified, not necessarily anyone in our district. So we hire for a short period of time so the instruction continues under a highly qualified teacher. 9 of those 15 are those teachers. They've ended their agreement with us to June 30th. They will not be coming back because we're bringing the maternity leave or the long stay at home or whatever it was that they were out for. Illness, whatever that may be the case. So 9 of those are from the 15. In addition to that, we were able to restructure a program that is no longer being funded for, I would say, 13 to 15 years, and that is our basic skills program. It was being locally funded. When we looked at it, it was close to $3 million for a handful of teachers. Teachers that are highly qualified in areas that we have need. So in discussion with the curriculum assistant superintendent and myself, we came to a conclusion that we can provide those services much more efficiently in a different way without having to have a teacher for a handful of students. It wasn't no longer cost effective. So we have 15 teachers that we're placing back into the classroom. I can say, standing today here, that we're not firing anyone except maybe 1 or 2 people that have been recommended for, under the new state regulation for evaluations that are not performing at the standard. So we're considering 1 or 2 people. And that's about it. We're not firing, we're not, and I see parents sitting here, I don't want this question to come up because the last thing that we would ever do, at least as far as I stand here, is put more students in a classroom, especially in this district. We have a lot of language issues, we have a lot of comprehension issues, we have a lot of children that need a lot of assistance. So what we try to do most of the time, if not all the time, is reduce the number of students in the classroom, either by providing an extra assistance or keeping the numbers at the state level or lower. So we're not, it's not firing 15 teachers, it's terminating actually a temporary contract because the other person is coming back. And as Mr. Franchetta said, we have had a lot more retirements. So we are able to now add to the teachers or perhaps the 1 or 2 administrators that we thought we may have to get rid of. It's early in the year. I think they still have a little bit of time to come in with retirements. We hear a big buzz. People are getting ready for their retirement parties, but they have not submitted. So we have to work with what we have at the present time. And that is what we have at the present time. That could change tomorrow, next week, or in 2 weeks. But we are always watching in the best interest of the students. That's what I really have to say with all conscience and honesty. Okay? Thank you.
I have another question. Now, are any of our programs in the high school, middle school, are we cutting back on any of the programs or clubs or anything that we offer right now for the students? Anyone else have any questions? Any other board members have questions?
Yes. Okay. Matthew had said much about the monies and where they're coming from. I feel that we need to know not where they're coming from, but what we're doing with them. And maybe that's where we have to feel comfortable sitting here, that we are making the best use of this in whether it be personnel or whether it be curriculum. I don't know why we would ask for a resolution for additional money or any of that if I feel that maybe we could take a look and see if there's more we can do in that area. So that seems to be my concern, because I want to make sure that as the years go along, we are providing. And I guess being an educator, I've seen too often where anything new that comes down the pike, well, let the VP do it, or let them add this to that, or give it to this teacher, when we could surely maybe use a new staff member with maybe a title. It's not really just throwing away money. I mean, we had not before these testings and so forth, and I think it's time for us, before we do something with a budget, to make sure that we are feeling comfortable, I mean, and looking ahead, and not just what we've done in the past. And I think that's very, very important, and I'm not ready to give that up at this point, because I know what it's like to come in every day and have somebody have to stay till 6 or 7 counting tests because we don't have the right people there to assist. And I don't want to see West New York in that situation. And believe me, it's not just West New York. It's some, you know, you go to suburbia and they have that problem too. But we can do something about it. And I want to make sure that it goes on record that we are going to try our best to make sure that we are handling what I think is one of the most important areas after students' needs, is how are we helping our staff to reach these children.
Okay, at this time, we'll open the floor for public comment on the budget.
Tommy Socio, MJDA, 6600 Boulevard East. Just a question first. 2 meetings ago, when I got up to ask the same question, I was led to believe that this was going to be increased by 3%. So during your presentation, you alluded to that, and then you had mentioned something about where the extra percent may come from. Is there any reason why it went back to 2?
At this time, administration just recommended the 2% increase.
Okay. Well,
But there's banked cap. I know that's what you're alluding to.
well, there is bank cap, and certainly it would be easy enough for you to add an additional 1%, and I happen to agree with some of the comments of board members that, you know, we have 3 bargains that are going to be starting, and we have a lot of change in the responsibilities of a lot of our staff because of the testing, because of the evaluation model, because of these other pieces. And as you look at 2% on your local budget, it's $297,000, and we're going to be coming in to negotiate for over 1,000 people. So I'm not 100% sure how you're going to cover that. just adding another percent would only give you another $140,000. So they're not significant figures, plus another $140,000 on whatever the tax rates are in the community doesn't seem to be a devastating amount even to the citizens of West New York. I understand West New York, and I understand the problems that even our citizens have and the problems that they have with their own budgets, but I don't think that adding another $140,000 would be that significant. That would be pennies on a property tax. So I would strongly encourage the board to consider adding a little bit extra money. And as far as the conversation about the budget, I agree with you 100%. It's disgraceful that the state does not fund education as it's supposed to do. If you all recall, a couple of years ago on the tourist army, we had a whole new budget formula that came in. As Kevin said, it was funded one time, and they have not since done it. They have not since funded it adequately. And in this last round of funding for this particular government, we've been flat funded here in West New York a couple of times, and it makes it more and more difficult for you to run the districts. So one of the things you are going to have to do, you should do, sending a letter, a resolution, you really need to reach out to your legislators. You need to get your legislators on board with this budget fight, because they're going to be in the budget fight now. That's what's going to be going on in Britain in the next couple of months. Not only about the pension, but in the budget in general. So that's something that you might look for in the budget. But I'm here to suggest to the board that if you're going to reconsider this at all, and reconsider sending it back to the county for change, I would strongly ask that you add the additional percent, because you can do it out of your bank cap. You can probably do another 4 or 5% out of your bank cap. But I know that there's a breaking point for the citizens of the town, so I'm not even going to push the agenda that far, but we certainly have work to do. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Okay, at this point, I'd like a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion.
Second. Motion by Trustee Parkinson, seconded by Trustee Rodas.
Trustee Acosta?
Yes.
Trustee Chang?
Yes.
Trustee Gonzalez?
Yes.
Trustee Palermo?
Yes.
Vice President Parkinson?
Yes.
Trustee Dr. Pizzatelli?
Yes.
Trustee Portillo?
Yes.
President Rodas?
Yes.
Okay. On the agenda, we had a session for executive session, but I don't see a need for that. When the agenda was struck weeks ago, I had it on there, so we'll just bypass that whole section of the agenda and move on for the board to either, I guess, adopt the budget or table, whatever the board's.
I'd like to make a motion to table this to the next meeting, the May
Second.
13th meeting. Okay. Motion by President Rodas, seconded by Trustee Gonzalez. Roll call, please.
Trustee Acosta?
Yes.
Trustee Chang?
No.
Trustee Gonzalez?
Yes.
Trustee Mahid, or Trustee Mahid not here. Trustee Palermo?
Abstain.
Vice President Parkinson?
Abstain.
Trustee Dr. Pizzatelli?
Yes.
Trustee Portillo?
Yes.
President Rodas?
Yes.
5 yeses, 1 no, and 2 abstentions. The motion carries to be tabled. At this time, we'll open the floor again for public comment if there's anyone who wishes to address the board on any matter.
My name is Linda Kellerman, 6600 Boulevard East. I have a son who goes to the West New York Middle School. He's in 7th grade. Yesterday evening, my son Matthew gave me a survey he wanted me to fill out about the middle school, and I had some concerns. The middle school seems to have far less programs for the parents, and there's no PTO in contrast to when he was at PS number 4. And those few programs that they did have for the parents, I believe they inadequately informed the parents. For example, there was a meeting on drug and gang violence by, I think, Miss Lambasa, I think in October, and was posted on the website, but there was no other communication. So I saw it, and I went, and I was the only attendee. And there were some sessions on the PARCC test for parents, and it was given on a sheet with a bunch of other events, you know, early school closings a month before the event. And I went on a morning. There were 5 parents who attended. Now, another issue I had, you mentioned about possibility of teacher layoffs or whatever. If most of my son's teachers are excellent, very dedicated teachers, he had about 2 who I believe were chronically absent. And I believe it adversely affects not only Matthew, but the other students. And I would strongly suggest, as I had mentioned last year, if a teacher is chronically absent, and unless they have a valid reason, the administration should really look at it. They should really be, you know, advocates for the children. And another thing is my son's class was switched early in the school year, and as a result, I noticed last week that his grade in physical education for the first marking period, missing. And luckily they corrected it, but you know, it's a little bit scary to see on the parent portal a missing grade. So Mr. Gagliardi assured me that there's another set of books where they have all the grades, you know, for all the assignments that the teachers made. But I just want to bring it to your attention, the parent portal is not perfect. And it should be just as accurate for the parents and the students to review as the permanent records. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board?
Ricky Solera, 6602 Lincoln Place. I can understand the board member's concern about a budget and whether or not a budget should be passed today or not. And I do understand that this is something that cannot be taken lightly. But I Googled what the definition of budget is, and it says an estimate of income and expenditures to be set for a period of time. Estimate. We don't know if we need 5 more teachers, 10 more teachers, 8 more custodians, 9 more custodians. I've been told by a couple of different custodians that they're deciding to retire, maybe December, maybe January, maybe March. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an estimate. We go by what we know that we expended last year. We go by what we think we will expend this year. But for sure, what makes it difficult is for administrators and supervisors to decide what we're going to do for next year if we keep putting off the budget. We put off the budget, and then what that does is, what month are we in? April. May and June. July starts a new school fiscal year. If we do not decide on the budget, then it makes every one of these people who are sitting here to my left, put them in a very difficult position to decide, what do we do? How do we spend the money? How do we allocate the money? Who do we hire? Who we do not hire? Is it possible that Mr. Smith, who's been here for 45 years and is going to retire, which cuts his salary in half, that now you're going to save half of that person's salary? We cannot foretell the future. If we could foretell the future, then we would be in a better position. So the budget needs to be passed, and needs to be passed soon, whether it's tonight or whether it's in the next meeting. We do not have that much more meetings coming up before the new fiscal year starts, which is July 1st. So you should keep that in mind, that July 1st is when our new fiscal year starts. And it puts all the administrators, all the supervisors, and all the staff in a precarious situation. It's an estimate. I just read you the definition of what a budget is. It's an estimate of what we think we might be expending in the next school year. So I do understand your position. I sat there many years ago as vice president on this board and had to make the same decisions that you're making today. But to put it off to another day is not a very good thing because it puts everybody else in a very bad situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Solaris.
Jack Steffens, 854 7th Street, Secaucus, New Jersey. Again, I just want to reiterate something that Mr. Franchetta said. It's important to own your budget as soon as possible. And it is true. You can make transfers to anything and everything and get approval from the county after the fact, okay? The only reason I can see, and to think you're going to get more money from the state, the only way it's going to happen is by a lawsuit that the Ed Law Center runs, and if they win it, you're not going to see that money for probably months. Okay, so writing a letter is not going to get you more money. The only reason I see not to pass this budget tonight is if you're going to increase the tax levy more than it is, or reduce it. The tax levy is the only issue here for immediate thing, or anything that's going to possibly change. Everything else can be fixed later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Steffens.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Okay, we'll close that session of the meeting. At this time, board member comments.
I have a question. When we were discussing when to have the budget meeting, it's just a question. Kevin, when did you say that most urban school districts would have their budget? Earlier or later?
Later.
Later. So closer to the 13th? Or the 14th?
No, the window,
When-
ours is, today is kind of the middle of the window. I think the window might end next Thursday or so.
Okay.
So it ends way before the 13th.
But
Okay.
I do recall you did say that. That usually the most urban school districts, they wait
It
till
was,
the end.
it was kind of a dilemma for me.
We actually are the ones who decided to have a meeting earlier.
Yeah,
Just
our
in
budget
case we
had
saw
to be,
something we did not like, or something that we had questions on, then at least that would leave us time to get this done prior to the due date. Which, getting it done by the 13th would be prior to the due date, correct?
the due date is the 13th.
Well, our board meeting is the 13th.
Our board meeting is the 13th, the due date is the 14th, I'm sorry. Our budget, by statute, has to be printed in the newspaper, I think it's like 48 hours before the public hearing at a minimum. And the newspaper takes about 4 days, 3 or 4 days to do the typesetting. And the county had until last Friday to approve the budget, but it had to be in Saturday's paper, would be the last possible day that it could be printed. And luckily, I had no choice but to send it to the newspaper on Tuesday, and I didn't get approval till Wednesday.
No,
Kind of
understood.
rolled
I
the
just had a
dice
quick
because,
question, because
yeah.
I wasn't understanding. I was lost.
Board member comments?
I have a question. Since as of this moment, the budget has been tabled, what do people anticipate happening between now and May 13th with regard to the budget?
I was going to your point, Trustee Palermo. I was going to suggest to this board, although, I mean, we can sit here tonight too and continue discussing, but if we've now tabled the budget for further discussion, do we intend to continue this discussion tonight, or would you like to schedule a work session meeting between now and the next board meeting to discuss any changes or modifications or additions that the board members would like to see to this budget?
Well, I think that if any board members have questions, which I do, we could probably reach out to Kevin Franchetta, his administrator, with any questions we may have, and come prepared for the next board meeting to ask this question, or have everything ready for the next meeting and the budget that we all agree on, or any questions. Like, I have a couple of questions that I wrote down that I'd like to ask, especially with letting go of teachers. It's not about an estimate of how many we're adding. I want to know why exactly we're letting go of 15, possibly 15 non-tenured teachers. I don't know how comfortable I feel with that whatsoever. And some of the audience members, some of the audience and the union members had mentioned a couple of good questions that were like mostly asked myself.
Again, I'd like to reiterate that this is we are under the Open Publics Meeting Act. It is important that the public see how we deliberate. So if we have any questions, I mean, I'd like to hear them and the answers. So.
And you will, because I'll ask them when they come, and anybody else that has any questions, you can ask them freely too at the next meeting.
Do you have any other questions, Ms. Trustee Plummer?
No.
I'd like to ask this board, can I speak?
Yes.
I'd like to ask this board if the board is interested in raising the tax levy in addition to 2%, as was posed to us. Well, I did pose it. I'd just like to reiterate for myself, you know, I do plan on running in November for this school board election. And, you know, as I said in my comments before, I think the tough part is balancing the educational needs as well as the property tax owners. If we raise it beyond a certain amount, I'm very concerned. The property tax owners may, as they have in the past, be very upset at the board and as an elected official. I have to balance this. You know, I have a daughter in the district. I'm also a property tax payer as well. I mean, I do think that we can go to 3% perhaps if the board is interested. I don't think that this is an extraordinary amount. I do think that this gives us a little bit of wiggle room with the 3 contracts that are under negotiation right now. And to me, that's the only change I also agree. I think that's the only change I would see in this budget right now.
So you agree there should be some changes?
Well, I'd like to know what the board's opinion of if they're interested in raising the taxes beyond the 2%, because that's the only change that I would be interested in.
So you agree there should be some changes?
I'm just saying that that's the only change I see. And as we were, I'm not exactly, board attorney, I'm not exactly sure how we should word the resolution that I was suggesting earlier about urging the state to fund us per the latest Abbott decision. Perhaps you can suggest to us how we would word such a resolution.
Well, certainly, I mean, if you were the maker of the motion, it would be at your discretion, but it could be something as simple as just urging the governor and the legislature to increase the state aid that the district would be receiving. If you want to tie it to a certain event, like the litigation, you could do that, but you may not want to limit yourself either.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to make a motion to the West New York Board of Education urges the state and the legislature to fund the West New York School District in addition to the monies already allocated for 2015-2016. And I'd like to CC this to our state senator and 2 assembly people.
I have a question. How likely is it for such a request to be granted?
Very, very, very little. We've tried this in the past. The governor's not in the budget, so to be very honest with
As I said before, they might take away money, so
you. Yeah.
we should say we need more money. I don't think it hurts.
So did you say that if we send out this letter, they might want to take away money from us?
No, I'm saying that in fact what may happen is this, whatever we do here, as I said before, 95 million of our funding comes from the state. The state may come back and claw back any amounts of money because the state is, frankly, the state is broke. I mean, they're trying to raise revenues as well. You know, they're wrangling with their budget right now. they're proposing to raise taxes. I know it's very unpopular. But at any time, the state can come back and claw back money as they have in the past from the district.
I mean, I would just be careful. I don't know what this letter is going to do. Is it going to make us look good or look bad? I don't know. I don't know how that's going to impact us at all. But if we want to, I guess we can attempt it.
I have a suggestion. We do have a balanced budget as of tonight, as Kevin, Mr. Franchetta presented to us. As has been pointed out, there is some leeway. We still don't know how many retirements we will have. It's possible that there will be additional retirements. It's only April. Maybe we should rethink the motion to table the budget and vote on it tonight.
I thought you abstained.
I did.
Trustee Palmer, are you making a motion to pass the budget?
I-
To adopt the budget?
After we just tabled it? Is this okay to you guys? I don't understand.
Yeah, at this point, I'd have to step in. Was a motion made on the letter regarding the state aid? I mean, you shouldn't get too far ahead of yourself on
Okay.
that. You would need a second.
You have a smile
and
on
you
your
would
face, and we're
eventually
talking
have
about a
vote on that
$130 million
first.
budget, man. This isn't a game. We just tabled it to the next meeting.
Mr. Rodas.
Did we just close this meeting?
Mr. Rodas.
You guys are like laughing and going
You
back
were-
and forth with each other, and
Mr.
I don't
Rodas.
see how this is funny at all.
Mr. Rodas, what I don't understand is that you are saying that you didn't come to this meeting prepared.
No, I was
That's
saying
why I'm
that one more
laughing,
time.
because
I had-
you're actually saying you didn't come to this
Public
meeting prepared. I came to this meeting prepared. I had the questions I wanted, asked and answered, and I asked them in public as well. And so, you're tabling it for another day and saying that you have questions, but you're not willing to say it in public so that I can hear them. And we're going to walk into another meeting in 2 weeks. You're not proposing that we create another work session meeting so that we can all work on this again. So yeah, I think sometimes I don't understand why we don't come to these meetings prepared.
Well, we have a budget committee, we have a finance committee that will
Did the Budget and Finance Committee
We have a budget
committees
committee,
meet before this meeting?
And we'll have them, yes, we'll have them sit down.
Did they meet before this meeting?
No, they did not, not that I know.
Why didn't they?
Well, they will now.
Okay.
Anything else, Matthew?
I think my motion is on the floor.
Well, I didn't hear you create a motion whatsoever. I didn't hear a motion. Did anybody else hear a motion? I didn't hear a second either. Motion to close this meeting?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Acosta?
Yes.
Trustee Chang?
No.
Trustee Gonzalez? Trustee Palermo?
No, I think we have unfinished business, and I think it's irresponsible
Either a yes,
to
no,
just
or
close
nay.
the meeting at
It's
this
either a yes, no,
time.
or abstain. Ms. Palermo?
My
It's
vote
either-
was
it's either
no,
yes
and I
or
gave a
abstain.
reason why.
Vice President
Yes.
Parkinson? Trustee Dr. Pizzatelli?
Yes.
Trustee Portillo?
Yes.
President Rodas?
Yes.
The meeting is concluded.